Welcome back to Smart Health. I'm Rachel Sanders, and today we're joined by Mollie Eastman. Mollie Eastman is the creator of Sleep is a Skill and the host of the Sleep is a Skill podcast. Her company optimizes people's sleep through a unique blend of technology, accountability, and behavioral change. After navigating insomnia while traveling internationally, she created what she couldn't find, a place to go to learn the skill set of sleep. She has now dedicated her life to sharing the forgotten skill of sleep. With a background in behavioral change from the nonverbal group, she became fascinated with chronobiology and its practical application to sleep and our overall experience of life. In this episode of Part 1 with Mollie Eastman, learn what circadian health is, why it is so important for sleep and overall health, and what lifestyle changes you can easily implement to improve it. Mollie, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I know a mutual friend had connected us, so very excited to be able to dive in deeper with you.
Yes, excited for this conversation on all things sleep and circadian health. To get us started, would love to hear a little bit more about your story and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's hopefully helpful for the listeners because my story is one of kind of solving my own problem with sleep. I had my own sleep issues. And so I actually truly do think of my life now in a 3-part series. How things were before I had what was really now I think of as kind of like a sleep breakdown or just this real challenging period in my life around sleep during that period and after. So the before, what that looked like was, even as a kid, teenage years, going in college, a lot of labels and narratives around my sleep. I would say things like, I'm a short sleeper, I'm a night owl, it's in my genes, I'll sleep when I'm dead, all of those sayings that we can just really casually say, quite often. And it really wasn't until things started getting more extreme for me as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends. I would be justified and righteous. And I would say, well, if I go to bed late, I'll just wake up late. Whatever. I make my own hours. Who cares? And yet not realizing some of the deleterious effects that was bringing on my health and well-being and mental health too. I was getting more anxious as, the days would go on. I had the beginnings of an ulcer. I had shingles in my 20s. A lot of signs that how I was managing things weren't really working, but certainly not correlating sleep into that equation. So it wasn't until I went through this period of insomnia that absolutely just shook me to my core. I have a family with a history of mental health issues and pharmaceutical use. And so when that happened for me, it was this fear of, oh no, is this like the moment where now I'm going to be dependent on pharmaceutical drugs to get me to fall asleep? And when I went to the doctors, I left with sleeping pills. And that was really, which is, if anyone's listening, that is not supposed to be how it goes. It is now, at least in the United States, the recommendation is to first begin with CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. That is supposed to be the beginning steps that you are given. It doesn't always happen, but so for me, when I left with those sleeping pills, it was a real wake-up call, no pun intended, that I needed to really get up under this. So that began this quest to understand what does it take to get great sleep, not from just like a esoteric, like philosophical question, but from I need to fix this because I feel like I'm losing my mind. So then I went down the rabbit hole, spent a lot of money, time, energy, effort. A lot of things didn't work. And then eventually over time, things began to work. And then once I got my sleep back to what I shared wasn't even that great, like a homeostasis, then I got to be able to discover, oh my gosh, there's this whole world of optimizing your sleep that I didn't even think was available to me as someone that thought I was a bad sleeper, short sleeper, night owl, all those things. And once I started tapping into that and actually getting to have the experience of waking up feeling rested, feeling well, feeling consistently able to take on my day in a way that I never thought was possible. I used to be someone that woke up with headaches, zombie-like, so tired, just the experience of surviving my day. So when I started to get that on the other side, I just could not stop talking about it. And then just organically, these small groups kind of emerged. And then what became known as now Sleep is a Skill. And what we are really serving is part of what I couldn't find. I really wanted like a sleep support group or a way to usher through some of these findings and also just not feel alone, but then also to get up under even beyond just like not being able to sleep than getting great sleep. So that whole world got created out of this company. So now we have a particular niche in high stakes poker players. So I work with a lot of high stakes poker players on optimizing their sleep. And when you think about it, it's they are great test case because they are often in casinos for the live game players, and they're often in casinos which are designed on purpose to confuse our circadian rhythm, because the circadian rhythm piece was one of the big components that I discovered that became so fascinating. So we'll certainly talk about ways to get up under that component, but for them, they're in an environment that's designed intentionally to confuse your circadian rhythm. No windows, lots of stimuli, kind of that static lighting throughout the course of the night. And then lots of that, tilt, as they say in poker, where you have a lot of stress, kind of high stakes, low stakes, and, on the either side of it, if you're winning, losing, whatever. So with that, we can learn a lot from those individuals that are up against that. Many of us are not that far off because most of us are now living in an indoor environment very clearly. We have stats to support that. So we're inside often, which we're not designed for. So we become these zoo animals, and we have our own slot machines with our phones and all this, Netflix and all the fun things. And we are now up against this epidemic of sleep disturbances, deprivation, and otherwise. So we can get into the how to interrupt that.
Talk to me a little bit more about circadian rhythm and circadian health. What is it, and why is it really important?
Yeah, great question. I know I've threw that term out, but it's probably helpful to kind of define that, which is around a 24-hour rhythm or so around. And so it is this innate kind of biological rhythm that we're operating within, but we can actually have a say in the strength of our circadian rhythm. And furthermore, as human beings, we're diurnal creatures, meaning that we're meant within that 24-hour rhythm to be active by day and at rest at night. And we do know from many studies of shift workers that are doing nothing more than just being active at night, when we're not really designed to be doing that. We're not nocturnal creatures. We're meant to be moving around, doing most of our stuff by day. So when we mess with that, we do find, sadly, that there can be an uptick in a number of disturbances from a health perspective, but certainly from our sleep as well. But it can ripple into other things like cancer rates, diabetes, mental health issues, but of course, that sleep-wake cycle. So if you're looking to improve your sleep, we call our company Sleep is a Skill for a reason, because I now believe that we've gone so far off the track of what it takes to get great sleep that we don't even know what normal alignment with our circadian rhythm would even look like. I lived in New York City, Vegas with my poker players, and in these places that are designed to have 24-hour lifestyles. And so many of us struggle to even know what time does sun rise, what time does sun set, how would I align some of those things with any of that, and why would I care about it? And it turns out that we're seeing in the sleep domain that you absolutely want to use this as a bit of your superpower. And I also believe that this is going to be a huge trend emerge. It's already happening now in the health and wellness space, but I anticipate it will be much more impactful, because even to things like, supplementation, chronopharmacology is something that we want to be aware of. This is all under the umbrella of chronobiology, the science of time and how time affects our biology. So the timing of our drugs, that includes things like caffeine, alcohol, THC, but also supplements, pharmaceuticals, etc. So that can change very much the effectiveness of those, and sometimes have deleterious effects if taken at just the wrong time. And that's just one aspect of this timing conversation.
And how do you figure out what your circadian rhythm is and know if it's normal or not?
Yeah, really good question. So for one thing, I'm saying all these things and it might be like, okay, but how do I make this practical? If you get nothing else out of what I'm talking about, know this. that our body is created from trillions of clocks, or every cell and organ in our body virtually seems to have these little clocks in them that we've discovered in recent years. And all of these peripheral clocks are kept on time by our master clock, this suprachiasmatic nucleus in our brain. So all of these clocks really want to stay on appropriate time. So how do you stay on time? It's about consistency. So sleep loves consistency. Where can you begin? Because there's a lot of things you could begin with. I would implore that we could begin with our wake up time. It's one of the first places that we have a say over, because if you're struggling with your sleep, sometimes, good luck forcing sleep and saying, fall asleep at this time, good luck. Although we do have that problem for some people that are sleep deprived. So if you're someone listening and saying, this episode's not for me, I fall asleep the minute my head hits the pillow, that's also a warning sign for us that you might have a problem with your sleep. You might be either sleep deprived or have an undiagnosed sleep disorder. And there's a lot of sleep disorders out there. But if you begin with your consistent wake up time around 7 days a week, including the weekends, that can be a place to begin to just have this anchoring system so that you are resetting your master clock at around the same time every single day. And we want to pair and marry that wake up time with bright light exposure as closely as possible. And not from behind a window. If anyone's watching this, I've got these windows behind me. This won't actually count for me in the same way that it would of physically getting outside, because we do see that in some studies, it can take anywhere from 50 to 100 times longer to reset your master clock when getting light from behind a window, because it's filtering out certain spectrums of that light. So the marrying of that wake up time consistently and that bright light exposure will help with that place to stand for that consistent aspect of things. And then we can layer on other things to strengthen your circadian rhythm. So if you're someone that's like, well, I'm pretty good, during the week, but then the weekend comes and of course I sleep in, et cetera, et cetera. Well, right there, we know that your circadian rhythm is not as strong as it could be. And that's having the effects of jet lag, even though you didn't get on a plane necessarily.
What about people who wake up before the sunlight hits? This is something we're about daylight savings time. Something I'm dealing with right now is I'm actually waking up when it's still dark outside. When do you go out and get that morning light? When you wake up when it's dark?
Absolutely. Okay. So there are two camps in this conversation. So I will share both. So one is the circadian camp that says, okay, you can then wake up and have faux lighting. So you would use like a SAD lamp, seasonal affective disorder lamp, bright light therapy. And then you would just expose yourself to high amounts of blue light because anything, as we start getting into those higher amounts of blue light going, 10,000 lux or more, and lux just being kind of that measurement of the intensity of that light, then that can be wake promoting and activating, and then you're helping to spur the start of your day. Now, that can be one, and there certainly are studies to support the effectiveness of that can help with mood, and it's almost like free, coffee that you can give to your body from a wake promoting perspective. Also having some of these benefits for other effects on mood, telling the body it is wake up time. So there is that. Now, I will say that there are more kind of and I'm looking for a better term for this if anyone wants to send any suggestions. But I'm looking for better terms for almost ancestral health as it relates to sleep. And that group will more purport that you're looking to align with these rhythms of nature as much as possible, because they are, it's been the guiding force for thousands of years. And who are we of only 144 years of having access to fake light that now we think we should just like design all these things. So if we go with that ancestral perspective, then if anything, we would in the morning be exposed to red light. So it's still not disrupting some of our circadian rhythm quite as much. And that would be closer to what's present in sunlight outside, particularly in the morning where it's more pinky and red rich. So you're getting that red light just to be able to kind of do some things, but not overactivate a already blue light heavy lifestyle, which many of us are, almost getting too much blue light, but at all kinds of wrong times. And that can cause some concerns around things like glucose regulation, mood management, your waistline, other things. So from that perspective, you're looking to align as much as you can, and you might even change if you have this available to you. I know everyone doesn't have this available, but if you are able to change your wake up time, then how could you align it a bit closer to sunrise so that you're aligned with these rhythms as much as possible? The other call out is in the winter. Historically, what would we have done when there's just more darkness? Well, it would have been kind of known as a season of melatonin, and we would have slept more. That's kind of what we would have been, how we would have navigated the seasonal change. And yet nowadays we're not sleeping more. And there's questions of, what is that doing for us? And then we're getting disconnected from these rhythms and just trying to make our own rhythm. So personally, and the things that I share with with Sleep as a Skill is how can we try to live within these rhythms of nature as much as possible. Now, sometimes that does change if you're a shift worker, you're dealing with lots of jet lag, you're jumping tons of time zones. It might make sense for you then to have a lot more of this faux light intervention.
I think that's also true if you're a parent, because you don't always get to decide when you're waking up in the morning, whether it's school or your kids decide to wake up at 5 a.m. in the middle of the dark and come wake you up. So these the light therapy sounds like it's a good option for folks like that as well.
Absolutely. From the parents and kind of family perspective, still aiming to create as much of a circadian aligned lifestyle for kids as well, because we're seeing more than ever problems with sleep for children in ways that we've never seen this really before, including things like sleep apnea, insufficient melatonin production, which is like historically insane for kids. You would not be often seeing this exhibited. Also oddities in sleep staging for children. And the big question is this faux light a problem? So just recently this year in 2023, a preprint has come out where it's banding together with 250 circadian scientists, and they're all calling for warning labels to be put on the light bulbs when used at night. Why? They're citing 2,700 peer-reviewed studies that point to problems when we're using light at night, faux light at night that has this blue light centric in it, blue light, present, because it's related to some of those things that we spoke about, the cancer rates. We know particularly breast cancer and prostate being linked up with just using faux lights at night and being active at night, and diabetes, mental health issues, and certainly our sleep-wake disturbances.
What are some of the other disturbances that we see in the modern world? You mentioned blue light. Is there anything else that people need to be aware of or pay attention to throughout their day?
Oh my gosh, great question. Temperature. So that's another thing. What else is the problem of us all going inside? So how do we know we've been going inside? Since 2001, the EPA did a big study where they found that the average American is spending about 93% of their days indoors. And that was before smartphones, fun, Hulu and whatever, Netflix and all the things, HBO and stuff. So all these things that are keeping us indoors, it's likely that those numbers have gone up, certainly even before pandemic and other things. The problem with going indoors is that now not only are we impacting our light environment, which we had a subject matter expert from NASA on the podcast recently, and they pointed to in their estimations 3 times too dark of days most of us are in, and 3 times too bright of nights. And then I've had other experts pointing to way more than that. So somewhere in that range, we're certainly dealing with that problem. And that's way confusing our clocks. So that's the light piece. But the temperature piece is another big problem, because now we're indoors. We're all kind of hanging out at 72 degrees or whatever it is inside.
Exactly what my thermostat is at right now.
Totally. Yeah, I know. That's same. Like that's kind of what it ends up being. And yet historically, we did not have that in the past. And that lack of high amplitude change. So we want a high amplitude change both in our light. We want bright days, dark nights. It's the biggest thing. If you get nothing else of what I'm saying, just remember that. But we also want that in our temperature. We want warm kind of body temperature throughout the course of the day because you're moving, you're active, you're outdoors, you're under the sun, you're doing all these things. And then historically, the sun would set. What else would happen? For those of us that go to the beach or whatever, and you have a whole day where you get so much bright light, it's warm, it's hot, you're sweating, whatever. And then the sun sets, and then suddenly like the sand's cold and you're cold and you need sweaters. And you're like, what happened? It just all that happened is the sun set, but now it's telling the body that it is time to begin to down regulate. That temperature change gave us information, gave the body information about what to be doing and when, and that would also then create more of a melatonin rise. So bare minimum, in our indoor environment, I don't expect us all to move outside or anything. So if you want to, you can, but if you are staying inside, then how can we manually turn down our temperature in our space progressively in the evening to signal in the same way, and then certainly markedly turning our environment as cool as you possibly can while you're sleeping. So we know that both for ambient temperature, and then since we have such a large data set of Oura Ring users, so we have every client we're working with has to wear an Oura Ring to participate in our programs. So we've got a large amount of data on some of the things that can measurably make a difference with sleep. Things like cooling mattress toppers are one just very quick way that can really improve lowering heart rate for many, and improving HRV for many, and for some that playing into their deep sleep numbers, and less certainly sleep fragmentation we often see as well. So that temperature one is another big one.
What other pieces of advice do you have for people that have trouble falling asleep?
One, know that sleep is a skill and that there are so many things. I hope it's like fascinating of, oh my gosh, there's all these things that I can do to improve my sleep. Yay. So one, if we are running around with undiagnosed sleep disorders, where there are a lot of sleep disorders, but most commonly sleep apnea, and the rates for that are way rising, as well as things like upper airway resistance syndrome. More of these respiratory-based problems where people are not breathing properly throughout the course of our night. Some theories that could be also linked up to being indoors so often. We're not getting that vitamin D in the same way that we used to. And if you're in a northern latitude location, this can get much more complicated. We actually do see that if you're outdoors in the cold in a northern latitude location, that can help with mitochondrial function. And many people don't realize that melatonin is also created from your mitochondria. We used to think just pituitary gland, which is true, but it also is created in other places, including mitochondria. Well, one way to create mitochondria is by being outside, being under some amounts of sun, not too much, not too little, but also under the cold. So cold therapy, we know, can create more brown fat, and that's very mitochondrial dense. And then that can help create more melatonin than many people are getting. But what I'd also say is one other really practical one that I also see people really excel in when they bring into their life, but also struggle from a behavioral and societal perspective, is meal timing. So meal timing is something that you can certainly play with, especially if you're tracking your sleep and measurably see the changes on your sleep quality, sleep results. And for, if you want other pieces of tech, continuous glucose monitors that you can bring into the mix. And that can also show us, are we having a lot of kind of volatility in our blood sugar throughout the course of the day. But then if it's happening by day, it's very often being mirrored into the night. And so what do we see then? Well, while you're sleeping, that annoying like 4 a.m. wake up, if we trace it back, we often can see for many people a drop in blood sugar at around that time. And now it's a stressor to the body. And now you're waking up. And often because of that stress response, it might even be that type of wake up where you're struggling to fall back asleep. So that can cause some real problems for our sleep results, but also that affects your body temperature, like I was mentioning. So if you're eating later into the evening, so bare minimum, the research points to at least around 3 hours being your last bite of food, bare minimum. But anecdotally, from wearable data, I've also seen a lot of benefits for people, even a little bit more than that, 4 or 5 hours or so before bed. So you'd want to, kind of explore that accordingly. And it's different for different people. But that can be another great way to improve your sleep quality.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me to be a part of it.
Yes, and thanks to all of you for listening to another episode of Smart Health with Rachel Sanders.